All right, so here we are. Let us begin our class, as I frequently do, by asking you what questions you have that you would like me to address. Yes?
Can you give pointers and tips on writing fight sequences?
Excellent. That's actually on my list to do today. And so I will be getting to that. Today is going to be a plotting day, primarily. And then what I said, I still have to touch a few things on world building too. But yeah, we will be doing fight sequences, we'll be doing action sequences, and we'll be trying to talk about narrative flow for scenes a little bit. Even though we've already talked about it some, we'll touch on it again.
What do you think is the importance of like a well-rounded education? Like I know you graduated with honors. How does that help your...
I graduated with honors because my friends all did, and I'm like, no, sure, why not? And because, don't let the secret out, but the honors classes are easier. Because they tend to be filled with people who are interested in the topic. And because of that, they're more fun. And because they're more fun, they're easier. They may have more work involved, but I found them drastically easier because they were taught by people who really wanted to be teaching the class. And it was a topic that was more focused toward what I wanted to do. So I loved all my honors classes.
Like with regards to science,
but
biology.
A broad education for writers kind of come in two general big groups. Someone was talking about this to me just recently, and I agreed with it. That you have the writers who know a lot about one topic in extreme depth, and they play to their strengths and write books about that, right? You can probably name a few of these. Go for it. Who would be a writer like this? Michael Crichton as a scientist, yes. Tom Clancy, yes. John Grisham, a lawyer. He writes he's expanded, of course, in the past, but at its core, lawyer books. George R. Martin is a medieval historian. And so there are people who know a lot about one topic. I mean, Herman Melville would be the quintessential version of this. The guy who wrote the Jack Aubrey books, whatever his name is, Master and Commander. Come on. O'Brien. He would be another great example of this. And those tend to be, they can be very good books. The other type of author is the author who knows a lot, or knows a little about a lot of things. And so they write books that are very broad-based, that include a lot of different things. I think Robert Jordan was like this. And rather than focusing on one topic, they tend to, touch on a lot of different things. I'm more one of these type of writers. And so really it depends on what you want to make of your writing. I think it's very valuable for a writer to have, particularly in fantasy, science fiction, to have some experience with psychology classes, some experience with history classes, but you have to find the right ones. You've got to find the whys for the history classes. In other words, some history classes are going to focus a lot on dates and things. And I know that's the dry, generic thing, but I did take some that did that. You want to find the history classes that are going to say, this is why the stirrup revolutionized warfare. If you can find the classes that teach things like that, those are the classes you want to be in. So I feel that science is very useful, but again, it depends on what you're writing. If you're writing science fiction and you want to write hard science fiction, you're going to want to be one of the focused type of writers that knows a lot about a few really powerful scientific topics, and then you leverage that into your writing, in your novels. If, on the other hand, you want to write space opera, then knowing enough about science to not call a parsec a unit of speed might be an advantageous thing. So, I know that he retconned an explanation for that. You don't have to tell me. Any of you guys know what I'm talking about?
Yes.
Who doesn't know what I'm talking about? You're in a science fiction fantasy class? Yes. Well, what I'm referencing. In 12 parsecs. And parsec is a unit of measurement. That's, like saying, I managed to run a marathon in 13 miles. But, yeah. They've taken the expanded universe writers love this one, and they've gone to great lengths to make it rational. That it's like, you like the light speed changes the distance you travel if you go. Anyway, it's really funky. I'm impressed by what they do. But anyway, knowing enough about a lot of things to not sound like an idiot in them, and that can get you, as I've said, very far. So it depends on what you want to do. Stephen King said, the last thing you want to do to be a writer is major in English. I agree with him with a caveat that, but major in English, if you are a writer, sure makes getting that major a lot easier because you can use your writing for classes such as this. And it makes getting your credits a bit easier, particularly with a master's degree. But conventional wisdom from writers, and it is good wisdom, is that English majors don't necessarily make better writers than anyone else. And in fact, a writer who has something about which to write tends to make a better writer than someone who takes a lot of English classes, because what people don't know is that English doesn't focus that much on craft. Focus looks at literary analysis, which can be useful to you if you're approaching your books from the right way, but I think in large part a good history class is going to be more used to a fantasy writer. That said, I majored in English and got a master's in English, so yeah. All right, other questions? Ooh, right here.
Tell us about the educational value of video games in our...
Okay. I feel like I'd be preaching to the choir on this one. But the truth of it is, video games, like novels, like everything else, are entertainment. We're doing entertainment first. And that, we can talk all day about the literary value of books or what video games are doing. And there are lots of cool things they're doing. But I don't think it is right to not address the fact that this is entertainment. And, good entertainment does a multitude of things. But we aren't sitting down to write. I think that if you sit down to say, my first job is to inform, and then my second job is to entertain, then you end up writing a book that is like those books they forced you to read in grade school. That, it's like the Dinosaur Train. Does anyone have kids has to watch Dinosaur Train? Okay, so Dinosaur Train is like, it pretends to be a kid show. My kid loves it, so it's great. It works for it. But it is not a kid it's not a story. It is, we're going to go learn about this dinosaur, and we'll put a very loose framework of a story around it.
Yeah, well, my daughter can name like
I know.
Carnivorous dinosaurs.
I know. My son is like...
She's 3 years old.
Is anyone here going to be a paleontologist? Will you please name dinosaurs things that 4-year-olds can pronounce? Because the only people in the world who care about dinosaurs are 4-year-olds and the paleontologists. So why not get them all excited while they're 4-year-olds, and instead of making it Diplodonca blah 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 blahsaurus, just call it something that's easy to say.
You know what?
Yeah.
They have a naming system.
Yeah. Yeah, they can come up with a new one. It happens. Pluto's not a planet anymore. These things can happen. But, yeah, my son's like, that's an Archaeopteryx. I'm like, you can't even say your name without slurring, but you can say Archaeopteryx. Okay. I suppose that's good. Anyway, so literary amount, I don't know that this is the place to talk about that, since it is a craft of writing class. But I do think it's important for you guys to think about what you're doing. You want your writing to be meaningful, but we are in a class about writing entertainment. Keep that in mind.
I think to kind of go on that, do you find it easier or harder to base a book on something like Infinity Blade?
It's definitely harder. It's definitely harder. It's more of a challenge. I try to do things like that to challenge myself and try different things. I think video games are a very interesting medium that is around to stay and will only become more mainstream as time progresses. We've already seen it become more and more mainstream. When I was a kid, nerds played video games. That's really how it was. And it transitioned into boys play video games. And then it transitioned into guys play video games, and now young people play video games. And middle-aged women who like to collect gems. Actually, one of the largest segments of gaming population is women playing Bejeweled, that type of game. But I think video games will essentially become there's right now you don't say to people, do you watch movies? You don't ask that because of course they watch movies. Who doesn't watch movies? I'm sure there are people, but but you do still ask, do you play video games? And I think, so it will become, it's a medium that's here to stay. Things are changing, and it is wise as writers to be aware of the possibilities there. Video games, particularly in the last 5 years or so, have really taken an effort to step up their writing because they found that what's going on, talking to the people in the industries, they have hit a point in the technological development where they can do technologically pretty much anything they want to do. And so the games are actually blending together because they're all having the same mechanics. And so because of that, what's starting to separate them is what separates one action film from another, which is the story you place around it to disguise the fact that it's basically just the same story done again. And they're finding that with video games.
Didn't you turn, like your book Infinity Blade, isn't that from a video game that
Yeah.
you're writing the story? You wrote the story?
They did the first game without my involvement. They came in and said, we need help with story. Would you like to be involved? And I said, I really like to dip my toes in this. So I wrote the book and then wrote the story for the second one. I co-wrote it. It was their story to begin with, so it's not like I co-opted the whole thing. But I did kind of blow in like a storm of storytelling and leave them with a world Bible and a history and a backstory and characters which hadn't been named and all of this stuff. And so, but yeah, it was a fun experience.
They're a local Utah company?
They are. Yeah, they're a couple of Utah guys from BYU, graduated, started their own company. It took off, got big. They got bought by Epic Games, who does the Unreal Engine. And they have a studio in Salt Lake. But there is room for video game writers. As of yet, the writers tend to be people who are on staff. So if you are a computer programmer and you have good storytelling chops, there's a good chance you would be allowed to write story. And you can get a job like that. Right now, they're not hiring very many people who are not part of the industry to just write for them. They're going to people like R.A. Salvatore rather than you. But it is a valid job. I do have a friend who's a quest designer for World of Warcraft. That's his job. He has an English degree. So